For decades, the social contract of technology was simple. You buy a piece of plastic and metal, you take it home, and it belongs to you forever. But recently, massive corporations realized that the one-time purchase is terrible for their profit margins. Companies are now using mandatory Wi-Fi connections and digital rights management to hold the physical hardware you already paid for hostage. Welcome to the era of the hardware ransom. A new logic now governs the world of technology. For decades, companies relied on the one-time sale. You paid up front, took your gadget home, and the transaction was over. But inside boardrooms and finance departments, a different vision took hold, a vision shaped by the promise of steady, predictable revenue. The subscription model, once the domain of magazines and cable TV, began to seep into every corner of consumer technology. Streaming services set the template. By 2023, over 80% of US households subscribe to at least one video or music platform, transforming entertainment into a monthly withdrawal rather than a single purchase. The appeal for corporations was clear. Instead of chasing new customers every quarter, they could lock in a growing base of recurring payments. A printer, a car, even a refrigerator, each could become a permanent source of income, not just a product sold once and forgotten. This shift wasn't just about maximizing profit in the short term, it was about forecasting. Recurring payments turn unpredictable spikes into smooth, upward curves on a CFO's chart. Lifetime customer value, a metric once reserved for insurance or telecom, became the holy grail for hardware manufacturers. A company could sell a $70 printer at a loss, then recoup the difference and more through years of ink subscriptions. The upfront price shrank, but the hidden costs stretched on, month after month. For consumers, this model changed the very meaning of ownership. The dollar sign on the price tag faded into the background, replaced by a string of calendar reminders, payment due, subscription expiring, feature renewal required. The promise of a one-time purchase gave way to a cycle of dependency. Cancel the payment, and access to basic features could vanish overnight, regardless of whether the hardware itself was fully functional. Profit forecasting software became as important as engineering. Companies tailored their products not just for performance, but for maximum subscription uptake. A product's success was measured less by units sold and more by monthly active users, and the percentage of those users who could be converted into long-term subscribers. The old model, where a company's fate rose and fell with the launch of each new device, began to look reckless by comparison. The line between a product and a service blurred until it nearly disappeared. Hardware was no longer just a thing you owned. It was a gateway to a contract, a recurring obligation disguised as convenience. The new business model didn't just change how companies made money, it rewrote the rules of the consumer relationship, transforming physical goods into digital services, whether buyers realized it or not. HP's Instant Ink program stands as the blueprint for how companies can enforce recurring payments through hardware that, by all rights, should already belong to the buyer. On the surface, the offer seems like a deal. A printer for as little as $70, instant ink deliveries, and no worries about running out. But the real cost is buried in the architecture, one that turns a simple office tool into a leased appliance governed by software and remote control. The key idea is subscription over ownership. Inside each HP Instant Ink cartridge sits an embedded microchip, designed not only to track ink levels, but also to validate the cartridge's identity. Every time a user prints, the printer connects to HP's servers, reporting page counts, cartridge status, and even document types. This is not just for convenience. The server handshake is the backbone of HP's enforcement system. If a subscription lapses, that same microchip can render the cartridge useless, no matter how much ink is left inside. The hardware is physically present, but the right to use it is controlled remotely, toggled on or off by a line of code. The technical enforcement goes further. After a 2016 firmware update, HP printers began rejecting third-party or refilled cartridges by default. The update enabled what HP calls dynamic security, a system that checks the cartridge chip against an HP database. If the cartridge is not recognized, the printer refuses to operate. For Instant Ink subscribers, this means that even a genuine HP cartridge bought at retail will not work if it is not linked to the subscription. Once canceled, the printer disables the subscription cartridge, sometimes mid-job, leaving pages half-printed and users locked out of their own devices. The company's official messaging focuses on flexibility and convenience, saying change or cancel anytime, but the reality for many is far less forgiving. One consumer on a public forum summed up the experience. They said they bought the printer and paid for the ink, but the day they canceled it, stopped working. They still had half a cartridge left, but the printer said cartridge cannot be used. It felt like I was renting my own hardware. HP's approach is not an isolated case of technical overreach. It is a calculated system designed to lock customers into a revenue stream that never ends. The printer, once a simple purchase, becomes a service endpoint, its value dependent on a server's approval. The embedded chip and server authentication are the gatekeepers, enforcing a business model where ownership is an illusion. The consumer, left with a bricked cartridge and a disabled printer, discovers too late that the real product is the subscription, not the hardware sitting on their desk. BMW's 2022 rollout of heated seat subscriptions landed like a punchline that no one found funny. The cars arrived on dealer lots with every wire, coil, and button for seat heating already installed, paid for in full at the time of purchase. But the warmth was not included. Instead, BMW demanded $18 per month, or $180 a year, to unlock the comfort of a feature sitting idle under the upholstery. The alternative was to pay $415 for so-called unlimited access to what was already physically present. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Owners flooded forums and social media, calling the scheme a shakedown. Memes mocked the idea of paying rent to your own car. Headlines accused BMW of double dipping, charging twice for the same hardware. The story spread far beyond automotive circles, igniting debates about the future of consumer rights in the digital age. BMW's justification, cloud storage and data transmission costs, rang hollow for many, especially since features like the 360-degree camera or adaptive cruise control also sat behind software paywalls, regardless of whether they actually required ongoing connectivity. The logic was clear. If a company can lock a button behind a server handshake, every physical part becomes a potential revenue stream. Inside BMW's boardrooms, the message landed. Peter Noda, a BMW board member, admitted the company had misread the room. What we won't do anymore is offer seat heating by this way. The company quietly rolled back the heated seat subscription, at least in most markets. But the retreat was selective. BMW continued to charge for software-based features, parking assistance, advanced driving aids, even the 360-degree camera, arguing these required ongoing data services. The hardware paywall had been exposed and rejected, but the broader subscription experiment survived. For a brief moment, consumer outrage forced a global automaker to blink. The heated seat saga became a rallying point, a reminder that when the absurdity of paying for what is already yours becomes too obvious to ignore, even the largest corporations can be forced to reverse course. A silent barrier now separates drivers from the full promise of their electric vehicles. The battery, once a straightforward measure of freedom and security, is now subject to restrictions that exist only in software. For years, automakers like Tesla have installed the same battery packs in different models, then used code to limit how much energy each owner can access. A Model S might leave the factory with a 75 kilowatt-hour battery, but if the lower trim is purchased, only 60 kilowatt-hours are available, unless a fee is paid to unlock the rest. The hardware sits beneath the floor, fully capable, but a digital lock holds back a third of its range. Unlocking those extra miles can cost $1,500 or more, depending on the model and year. No new parts are needed. The upgrade is a remote command delivered over the air that changes nothing physical, but everything practical. The official reasoning is efficiency. Building one battery pack for multiple models simplifies production and reduces costs. Yet for owners, the effect is unsettling. The battery gauge becomes a symbol of this new reality, a bar that looks full but is capped by an invisible ceiling. The true capacity is always present, just out of reach, available only for a price. This is not a matter of comfort or convenience. Range is safety. It shapes every decision, from planning a long drive to responding to emergencies. When a software flag determines how far a car can travel, the simple question, "How far can I go on a full charge?" becomes a negotiation. The risk is no longer just running out of power, but discovering that the power you need is locked away unless you pay again. In 2022, a Tesla owner learned this lesson firsthand when a warranty battery replacement arrived with a third of its range disabled by software. The company demanded $4,500 to restore what had already been paid for. Only after public backlash did Tesla relent. The message was clear: control over life-critical performance now belongs to the manufacturer, not the driver. Every device now carries an invisible tether. The moment a modern printer, car, or smart fridge powers on, it initiates a digital handshake with a remote server, a mandatory ping that decides whether the hardware in your home will work as promised. This is not a one-time check. It is a recurring ritual, hard-coded into the firmware, that repeats every few hours or days. The process is simple in concept, but absolute in its authority. The device transmits a unique identifier, sometimes a serial number or a cryptographic token, to the manufacturer's cloud. In return, it receives a signed license, often a short-lived digital key granting temporary permission to operate. If the handshake fails, the consequences are immediate. HP printers, for example, pull the company servers every 4 to 12 hours. If the server cannot be reached, or if the subscription status is revoked, the printer firmware disables ink dispensing, regardless of the physical cartridge inside. Tesla vehicles conduct similar checks, exchanging authentication tokens that determine whether a driver can access the full range of their battery. The same architecture governs everything from Peloton bikes, which require periodic server approval to unlock resistance settings, to smart thermostats that refuse to adjust the temperature without a cloud connection. This system is by design. Devices are engineered to reject local overrides, even if the hardware is intact and the user has paid in full. A missing or expired token means the device enters a restricted mode or shuts down entirely. The logic is enforced in silicon. Trusted platform modules and embedded security chips act as bouncers, blocking any operation not blessed by the server. There is no fallback, no local control. The device's primary allegiance is to the cloud, not the owner. The universality of this enforcement is striking. From printers to cars, from kitchen appliances to security cameras, the same architecture ensures that ownership is provisional. The server is the true gatekeeper, and the digital leash never slackens. As long as this handshake persists, the promise of ownership remains conditional, always subject to remote approval, always one ping away from being revoked. On May 15th, 2016, thousands of smart homes across the country fell silent. The cause was not a power outage or a natural disaster. It was a server shutdown, triggered by a decision inside Google's Nest division. The victims were owners of the Revolv Smart Home Hub, a device once celebrated for uniting lights, locks, and thermostats under a single roof. Nest had acquired Revolv in 2014 and had promised continued support. Less than 2 years later, that promise vanished. When Nest pulled the plug, every Revolv hub instantly lost its ability to function. The hardware remained physically intact, but its brain, the cloud server, was gone. No lights turned on, no doors unlocked. The hubs, which had cost users up to $200 each, became electronic waste overnight. There was no workaround, no local fallback, and no recourse for the thousands of people who had built their homes around this system. Consumer outrage spilled onto forums and into complaints to regulators. Some users demanded refunds, others called for legal action. The message was clear: a product that depended on a remote server could be erased from existence with a single corporate decision. The Revolv shutdown stands as a warning. When ownership depends on a server you do not control, the rights you thought you purchased can disappear at the flip of a switch. Repair advocates and lawmakers are mounting a direct challenge to the digital locks that keep modern hardware out of reach. In Massachusetts, the 2012 automotive right to repair law forced car makers to share diagnostic tools, opening up once closed systems. 8 years later, voters expanded the law to cover telematics data, setting a standard other states began to study. Groups like Repair.org and figures such as Kyle Wines have pressed for similar laws nationwide, demanding access to parts and manuals. Yet the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, especially Section 1201, still threatens anyone who bypasses digital locks, even on their own devices, with legal penalties. Manufacturers defend these restrictions as necessary for security, while critics see them as barriers to ownership. Despite fierce lobbying from tech and auto giants, new bills continue to surface. New York's 2022 Digital Fair Repair Act and similar efforts in Minnesota and California show a growing push to reclaim the right to repair. Subscription fatigue is no longer just an abstract complaint. It is a daily reality for millions of households. The average American family now juggles more than 10 recurring services, not just for streaming and software, but for the very hardware that sits on their desks and in their driveways. Printers, cars, thermostats, and even kitchen appliances quietly siphon away dollars every month, each demanding their own slice of the budget. Surveys from 2024 show a steep climb in cancellation intent. Nearly half of United States households report dropping at least one subscription in the past year, driven by a sense that the financial drain never stops. The psychological toll is mounting. What once felt like convenience now reads as a slow bleed. Another password to remember, another payment to track, another reminder that the things you bought are not truly yours unless you keep paying. The result is a growing backlash. As the tally of monthly charges grows, so does the urge to push back, to demand real ownership, or at least a way out. The frustration is not just about money, it is about control, autonomy, and the feeling that somewhere along the way, the promise of technology was quietly rewritten. Today, physical ownership means little when a company can lock, disable, or remotely control your purchased hardware. Each forced handshake, hidden subscription, or disabled feature redraws the boundary between user and product. As DMCA, legal gray zones, and server-dependent devices become the norm, consumer rights face an existential threat. So, who truly owns your tech now? Share your stories of locked hardware and digital shackles in the comments below.